Is sponsored by H&M Builders, Yisachas Woolen sponsorship for the Refuah Shlema of Menachem Mendel ben Sarah Batya and Devorah Fega Bat Rezel. So, let's jump right into it. So, title of today's class, Leadership, Greatness and Humility, Overcoming the Paradox. What's interesting is that there are more people that are afraid of success than they are of failure. Really interesting. And that is why so many of us struggle with the self-sabotage. And it's interesting, there's a saying, God has no grandchildren, which means that each and every one of us, our personalities were handcrafted by God himself. And each and every one of us has a very unique way in which God made us to reflect his image and likeness. And God said in Bereshit, in Genesis, that let us make mankind in our image and likeness. Each and every one of us carry a different aspect of that image and likeness. So therefore, in this very distinct, unique way that we carry, and only each and every one of us individually are the only ones who carry that specific, unique way of God's image and likeness. Thus, in that way, we are a leader. We need to share that with the universe. So each and every one of us is a leader, and we'll talk about that at the end, what that means, okay? So, just as we're each crafted uniquely and individually, so too our reasons for self-sabotage, our fear of success and leadership also is very unique. So when you speak to people, you can't just make a generalization and say, well, the reason why you're self-sabotaging is because of. However, there are general categories of reason why people self-sabotage, why we are truly afraid of success and leadership. So let's see some of them. Some of them are shame, guilt, fear of loneliness, fear of succumbing to ego, and fear of losing our altruistic ideals. All too often we see people become successful and they're not the same people. People become leaders, power, fame, they're not the same people. And we don't want that to happen to us. So much so that we have more fear of that than we have of poverty. And that's why self-sabotage is so strong. We push forward, we get frustrated with poverty, but we self-sabotage because we have a very deep fear of leadership and success. So, at the heart of all these reasons, what we're going to talk about today, at the heart of all these reasons of fear of success and leadership lies the paradox of leadership. There's a paradox in leadership which we're going to discuss today, and that's what we're really afraid of. Will we be able to overcome the paradox? Okay? So, on one hand, what leadership demands is a strong self-respect, identity, certainty, and clear vision of greatness. However, if any one of these mandatory qualities for leadership goes astray, we fall into any one of their dark sides because they've fallen into the hands of ego, then all of a sudden leadership becomes a horrible curse of tyranny. So it seems to be that the very talents and gifts that we need to be able to embrace leadership is Siamese twins with the very same talents that can lead us into the worst curse of leadership. That's what we're going to need to talk about today. How are we going to talk about this today? Because in a discourse that was delivered by the Rebbe in 1966, the Rebbe discusses exactly what went wrong with Korach and his rebellion. Korach and his rebellion were not simple people. Korach and rebellion are called in the pasuk, in the verse. They're called chieftains. They're called men of repute. Kruye Moyed. They were not simple people. 250 of the finest. And what happens? They all fall. Now let's think about that. What did happen? What happened was that Korach himself was a Levite. The other ones themselves were the heads of courthouses. So they weren't simple people. They all had leadership. What happened that they rose up against Moses and all of a sudden decided, no, we want nothing less than to be the high priest in the holy temple? What happened here? If we can understand what went wrong with this, and we can learn out from this, the lesson extrapolated from this biblical story will pave the bridge over which we can cross from the struggle of self-sabotage into being fully liberated and able to experience our true power of leadership. Okay? So before we go any further, we need to go through some introductions. These classes are built on mystical teachings of the Rebbe called Maimorim, and they discuss some serious mystical concepts. However, they always are going to be made practical. That's exactly what my job is. That's the job of the Jewish mind. So let's talk about this. Number one, the mystical definition of I pluribus unum and its insight to mystical paradoxes. You know about that, right? That was the slogan on the American seal. It still is, but I read that later they changed it to In God We Trust. But the bottom line is that I pluribus unum. That's a very interesting concept, which we're going to talk about from a Jewish mystical point of view. The second thing we need to talk about for today is the origin of Shabbat and Yom Tov. What's the origin, the mystical origin of Shabbat and Yom Tov? The third thing we need to talk about is today the origin of leaders. And then finally, the last introduction is the role of Moses for the leader within us. Each and every one of us has within us a leader, we said, but that leader must have Moses in order to be able to safely express leadership. Okay? So, let's go into the introductions. Number one, I pluribus unum means out of many one. Pluribus, many, unum, one. Out of many one. The reason for this phrase is precisely because from the universe's point of view, from our paradigm, the first thing that we simply see and practically see is the many. It's only through taking a closer look, doing different studies, as science is advancing, we're starting to learn that within the many lies one. Now, right now, presently, I'm not speaking specifically about the one with a capital O, referring to God. Science is actually uncovering, as we go through all the different layers. We talk about the molecules, the atom, we're going into energy. We're starting to find more and more that beneath all this multitude, all the many, the pluribus, we actually really have unum. We really have something one from which everything is made. That's number one. However, here's an interesting twist. From Kabbalah, we wouldn't be talking about this saying I pluribus unum, but I actually looked this up in Latin. We would be saying ex uno pluris, which is the exact opposite. From one, many. Because from the Kabbalistic and Hasidic point of view, it all started with the oneness of He and His infinite light. And from that became many. So while the phrase from the universe's perspective is from many one, out of many one, from the Kabbalistic point of view, the journey is actually to understand how out of one came many. Okay? So, but the point over here is that either way we're going to do this, whether you take it from the universe's point of view, or whether you take it from the Kabbalah and Hasidus point of view, whether the journey is from the many to one or the one to many, what the journey is going to bring us to the same concept, and that is to take us to a place where there exists no paradoxes. Because whether you're going to bring the many to its source of one, or whether you're going to shed the many and find within it the one, you're in a realm where there's no paradoxes. Because within one, there's no paradox. So this paradox of leadership, which demands greatness, yet humility, certainty, yet being humble, that's not a paradox once you become the journey of from either from one to out of one many or out of many one. But Kabbalah, and that's what we're going to do tonight, we're not going to take the journey from the many to one. We're going to actually question how out of one became many. And if we can understand that, we can understand how to get beyond the many, the lock of the many, and see the oneness. And therefore we can live with peace, coexistence of paradoxes. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at this. Shalom. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go through that journey. So let's talk about this. There's many different ways in Kabbalah and Hasidus. You can probably give a plethora of lectures just on this one topic. How did it come from the oneness of God? There is such a multiplicity. And within that multiplicity to carry such paradoxes. How can that be? How can it be light and darkness if everything comes from God? God is everything and everything is God. So there really is a lot of different ways to approach this in the teachings of Kabbalah. There's the Tzimtzum, there's many different concepts. But what I want to focus with you tonight is just one teaching in the Zohar. And from that we're going to understand how it happened that from the oneness of God came forth the many, and within them such paradoxes and contradictions. So, here's an interesting teaching of the Zohar. The Zohar says on the very first word of the Torah, which is Bereshit. Bereshit means in the beginning. The Zohar says Bereshit should be divided into two words. Bara Shis. God created six. And then the Zohar goes on to say, what six are we talking about? The 6 supernal days. Yomim Elohim, supernal days. What does that mean? So what that means is, by the way, that's what it means, that's what the Zohar says on the words, Bereshit bara et hashamayim. First God created the heavens. After that, it goes on to say, and the earth. The Zohar goes on to explain that, and the earth is the 7th emanation, which is the feminine mystique. So let's understand how this works. 6 supernal days, what does that mean? What it means is that there is the six masculine emotion emanations. You talk about the first, there's 7 emotions, and of the 7 emotions, the first 6, which are the heavens, plural, represent what? They represent the 6 male emotion emanations. Last week we spoke about it a little bit. There's kindness, there's strictness, there's the 6. These 6 male emotion emanations, they are what become the 6 supernal days. The 7th day, which is Shabbat, that represents the feminine emotion emanation known as kingship. Now, how does this work? So I just want to give you a simple way. The simple way to understand this is, I want you to picture in your mind a color-stained glass window. Now I want you to picture sunlight shining through that stained glass window. What are you going to see? Let's say the stained glass window has 6 colors for right now, or 7 colors. Let's include the 7th day. What you're witnessing is that the colorless sunlight shines through the stained glass window and all of a sudden picks up color. So that colorless sunlight that shines through, for example, the green piece of glass, all of a sudden you're seeing a green ray of light shining into the room. Not only that, but whatever that green color light is shining on, it's going to now have that touch of green to it. So you have the colorless light shining through the stained window, and suddenly the colorless light picks up the color and actually has that effect on whatever it's going to shine. This is actually the secret of the different names of God. Every single one of the names of God has a different color. And when the infinite light shines through that color, it now creates a new concept of divine light, and with it, it creates a new relationship with God. That's why if you look in the Torah, anytime you're going to find God talking about reward, you're always going to find the name of kindness. Whenever you're going to find God in the Torah, the verse is talking about retribution, you're going to find the name of strength, strictness. Thus you have always Elokim. Vayashtiv Elokim. And Elokim looked down upon Sodom, glanced upon Sodom. Because exactly what's happening is that the infinite light of God, once it shines through a certain name of God, it picks up a certain color, a certain distinct attribute through which it's relating to the world. And that's how the world experiences God in that situation. This is exactly what the Sfirot, the supernal emanations, are all about. Let's talk about it. What is the supernal emanation made of? It's simply made of a light and a vessel. Now, there are different opinions of exactly what goes on in the details of the light, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to take the simplest opinion. The infinite light, the light of all the 10 vessels, are all one and the same. They're colorless, the light of the infinite light. However, when it shines into the vessel of kindness, then what comes out towards the universe is God's infinite light manifested in the attribute of kindness. And so it is with each one of those different supernal emotional emanations. So let's look at it. Sunday is the first day of creation, right? The first day of creation was the first emanation, which is kindness. Kindness expresses itself in revelation. What did God create on the first day? And God said, let there be light. The second day is strength and strictness, which expresses itself through separation and boundaries, definition. What did God do on the second day? He separated the waters, started to define the boundaries of land. Let's jump ahead instead of going through all of them. On the sixth day, what is the emanation? The emotional emanation's foundation. What did God create on the sixth day? God created the foundation of the purpose of creation, which is mankind. Let's talk about Shabbat. Shabbat is the emanation of kingship. Therefore, on Shabbat, all mundane work is forbidden. And we are commanded to experience regality in spiritual service and the feast of wine, fish, and meat physically. So when the Zohar says that these are the supernal days, what he's saying is that every single one of those days reflect a different supernal emotional emanation. That's what the Zohar is saying. Now we can understand what we were looking for. How is that? Let's use the right Latin words again. Ex uno pluris, which is the opposite of what we said before. The opposite of what it says on the seal, the American seal, says the opposite, from many one. Kabbalah wants to know, how did it ever become from one many? Now we understand how. Because when the infinite light, the oneness, shines through all the different supernal emanations, what we're now experiencing is the many. Because those creations that come from the infinite light shining through the emanation of kindness, those through strictness and so forth and so on. So much so that within the Jewish people, the great scholars, Hillel was always lenient because he was receiving from the emanation of kindness, while Shammai was always stringent because he was receiving through the emanation of strictness. Thus you now understand how even the one Torah is understood and perceived in many ways, and they're all right. Thus we now understand how you get from one to many. Now that we understand that, we can now go on to the next thing. Oh, by the way, I wanted to share with you one more thing. The further on you go down the evolution from the one to the many, the more you're going to see multiplicity, separation, contradictions. The higher up you go, the more you're going to see the oneness and the unity. And that's why in our life, which is the end product of all the evolution of creation, what do we end up having? Such separation, such different definition. Everything about us screams out that we are different. Because we are the fullest evolution of from the one, many. The infinite light going into vessels, colors upon colors upon colors. Each one of those colors have so many different details, which every single one of us is so different than the other. In the way we perceive things, in the way we feel about things, and the way we are ourselves. Okay? So, now that we understand the 6 days, meaning the 6 supernal days, now we can begin to understand the source of Shabbat and holidays. How did Shabbat and holidays come along from a mystical perspective? To understand this, we need to go to an amazing teaching of the Zohar, Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah La'olam. 2,000 years before the world created, the Torah existed. The great Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Lurie of Tzfat, he says it can't be talking about 2,000 years because we know that the Bet of Bereshit created time and space, which is really one, they interact. So how can you have 2,000 years before time was created? Thus he says 2,000 years does not mean 2,000 years. We need to once again look into the deeper meaning. What is the word for 1,000 in Hebrew? Elef. Now the word Elef, you'll find in the verse, the Alef Chachachma, which means, and I will teach you wisdom. Thus the definition of Elef actually means teaching. Now what else do we have? Besides the concept of, and I will teach you wisdom, you have the Talmud, Masechta Shabbos. He goes through the Aleph base on page 104. And over there he discusses what the meaning behind all the different Hebrew letters is. Aleph base, the Gemara says, Elef Bina, teaching, understanding. So you have a verse which says Aleph Chachma, you have the Talmud which says Elef Bina. So you see that what does it really mean when it says 2,000 years on a mystical level? It means that before the supernal days, which we said are the supernal emotion emanations, there existed the two intellect emanations, wisdom and understanding. Okay? Now, we know that all type of reproduction happens when there's a union between the parents. Thus, in Kabbalah, Chachma is father, wisdom, Bina is mother, understanding, Dat is the consummation. Now, when you want to have a sustenance of emotions, you're going to have a union between the wisdom and the understanding. The union between the two intellect parents is what gives birth to the offspring, which is the emotions. You feel about things dependent upon how you see and understand and perceive things. So the emotions are the offspring of the parents, the intellects. Now, to understand this just a little better, in Kabbalah, besides the union of the parents, which need to create the offspring, you also need to have a consistent union between the parents in order to provide sustenance continuously to the offspring. Simple, right? Love, if it isn't fed, dwindles. Emotions need to be fed. Right? Why did David and Jonathan, why did they make an oath before they separated their ways? They made an oath, we'll always love each other. As long as we're together, we're feeding our relationship. We're feeding our relationship, we have nothing to worry about. We're going our own ways. They became worried because there needs to be a consistent sustenance. With this being said, I want to talk to you about two different types of unions. There's an external union between parents, which is only focused on providing for the offspring. That is called an external union. I know I'm giving you a lot of Kabbalah stuff, but just hang in there. It's going to all make sense. Then you have a different type of union, which is the parents focus on their own union, far superior than the child's capacity. That is called the internal union. The internal union is where the parents are bonding, the wisdom and the understanding are bonding on a certain level which is above and beyond the capacity of any offspring. The external union is the parents bonding just for the sake of providing sustenance. Okay? I don't have this in my notes, but I'm just looking at your faces. I want to see clarity there. So just to understand, you know, there's a marriage where they stay together just for the sake of the children. You know what kind of marriage that is. That's a very external marriage. There's a marriage where they stay together not because of the children. They're just madly in love with each other. That's a different type of marriage. There's an external union, there's an internal union. Now I want to get a little bit more detail to understand this Kabbalistic teaching. In the internal union between father and mother, i.e. wisdom and understanding, there's a difference if the dominant parent is the father, and then the production will be that of what's called in Kabbalah moichen de Abba, intellect of wisdom, father, or if the Bina, mother, is dominant, and then the outcome will produce what we call moichen de Ima, the intellect of the mother. Now, hold that thought for a moment. I just want to get practical with you. A teacher is studying Torah. The teacher studying Torah, there's two ways he can study Torah. One way, he's preparing a lecture. Another way, he's studying for himself. What's the difference between the two? When a teacher is studying to prepare a lecture of the student, what's his focus? On the capacity of the student. Everything that's going to come out of that study is within the capacity of the student. That's his focus. That's called an external study. That's an external union, and what he's producing is just for the offspring, i.e. the capacity of the student. But what happens when the teacher has a vacation, and now he gets to study not for the student? He's studying like every Jew studies. He wants to study Torah. When he's doing that type of study, he's not focused on the student. He's focused on his own growth, his own capacity of intellect, of wisdom and understanding. Out of that study, he can't prepare a class. That study is far superior than the capacity of the student. You see the difference again between the external union and the internal union. Okay? Now let's get to who's dominant in the internal union. What does it mean that if the dominant parent is the male wisdom, you're going to have what's called moichen da abba? And if the female, the understanding, the bima is the bina is the dominant parent, then what you're going to have is moichen di ima. What does that mean? Intellect. So let's talk about it. If you look in Kabbalah, we want to look, what's the outcome produce? So what do you say in your Hallel, right? It's a chapter in Tehillim. Aim habanim smechim. The mother of sons is simcha, joy. The outcome of an internal union in which the dominant one is the female understanding, that's going to manifest itself through joy and happiness. When you have the internal union where the dominant one is the father wisdom, let's look at what the verse says. What does it say about wisdom? It says that wisdom gives shine to the face. There's actually a story in the Talmud about Rabbi Avrohom, and they asked Rabbi Avrohom, what's going on? Why is your face shining? And he answered, he found a new teaching. Now, what does the word found mean? Found means he just found it. It's not understanding it. It's just wisdom. A new concept came to him. And what is the outcome? His face is shining. So in Kabbalah, we talk about wisdom manifests itself in delight. So you now have simcha, tanug, joy or delight. What's the difference between the two? The difference is, let's talk about the weekdays and let's talk about the Shabbat and the holiday from a Kabbalistic point of view. And obviously, guys, for those of you who are here the first time, we're not floating out here. We're walking out of here. And we're going to be very practical in how we can embrace leadership and get past our self-sabotage because we're afraid of success in leadership more than we're afraid of failure and poverty. So let's talk about this practically. But I need to get through some serious Kabbalistic concepts first. It'll all make sense. What's the difference of a weekday, of Shabbat, and of a holiday? When you talk about a weekday, what is happening? What's happening is there's an external union between the two Alpayim Shana, the wisdom and the understanding, and what's coming out of it. An external union gives only that which the student can absorb. That means the dominating force of the weekdays is the reactive emotion paradigm. Because the main focus is the emotion. And all the union that's taken up there to give us sustenance and life, and that the world exists on a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all comes from an external union which is focused just to keep the supernal days alive, and thus the entire experience of a weekday is a rat race. It's the emotion, it's reaction. When you have the higher internal union between the intellects, what are we now giving? We're now producing into the world something which is above and beyond the normal rat race paradigm, the normal reactive emotional paradigm. But one of two ways. What's the law of holidays? V'samachta b'chagecha, you shall rejoice, simcha. And what's the end of that verse? This next verse after it, v'yisam ach sameach. The experience of a holiday is the experience of joy. That's the law. Thus what's happening on this holiday is that we're being pulled up beyond the mundaneness. Once again, the prohibitions of doing rat race mundane work. Because we're now having an influence which is above and beyond the mini emotional reaction paradigm. What's Shabbat? The verse in Isaiah says about Shabbat, it calls it delight. Let me read to you the exact verse, if I can find it here. The exact verse of Isaiah is, it's in Isaiah 58, 13, 14, and it says, you call the Shabbat a delight, then you shall delight with God. Shabbat is not about simcha. When you girls get together on Shabbat, you have a women's program. What do you call it? Simcha Shabbos or Oneg Shabbos? We call it Oneg. But holiday is Simcha. Because Shabbat is where the dominant parent is Father Wisdom. Father Wisdom connects us to the encompassing power of delight. Holiday is all about Simcha. Because within the internal union, you have the dominant parent being mother understanding. Mother understanding manifests itself in Simcha. Okay? Now, I want to just share with you what you're hearing here. What is the job of a leader? You realize why we're studying the origins of Shabbat and holidays? Because I would say the 6 days, the weekdays, the rat race days, they're the concept and paradigm of followers. We're reactive. We're little hamsters running in a wheel. Comes Shabbat and comes holiday, we're not. We're lifted up. We're elevated. You realize that Shabbat and holidays, so to speak, in the realm of time, they are the concept of leaders. What is a leader's job? A leader's job is not just to provide the needs of his people for survival. The true job of a leader is to be able to take his followers and transform them into leaders. True leaders make leaders, not followers. The leader who makes a follower is not a leader, not a healthy leader. The leader that creates codependence is not a healthy leader. The leader that allows for a student to stand on his own 2 feet or her own 2 feet. The definition of a teacher is not someone who feeds semantic data to his student or her student. The real job is for a teacher to take a student and develop his mind, because on the level of student, the child is in the paradigm of reactive emotions. A teacher elevates by becoming a leader and making his student become a leader by lifting them up. What Shabbat and holiday does to time is it introduces into this new concept that instead of having the rat race, oh my God, I gotta run, I don't have enough time, I'm coming, I'm meeting, I'm going. We're always reactive. Oh my God, another bill. Oh my God, what am I going to do? The meeting, the train, the traffic. All of a sudden, Shabbat and holiday just lifts you up and says to you, come on, maspik. There's a better way to live. Do you live to work or do you work to live? At some paradigm, we live to work because we have bills, right? What's that famous little bumper sticker you saw in the car? I owe, so off to work I go. That's a rat race paradigm. That's the emotions, reactive. But Shabbos and holiday, i.e., just in parenthetically speaking, how many of us are, thank God Shabbos is here so we can rest to be ready for Monday? Oops. That's not what it's all about. Shabbat is here to take us to a different paradigm, to understand why we even bother working on Monday. So Shabbat and holidays is the concept of leadership in the realm of time. Now we can move on to understand what leaders, people, human leaders are all about. Human leaders, just like Shabbat and holiday, you talk about followers, are the concept of reactive emotion paradigms, the 6 supernal days. You have Shabbat and holiday, which is the internal union, which is where I'm focused on an essence experience of the truest self. Not how to make another buck, not how to outsmart, but to just elevate myself. From that perspective, it depends whether you're going to have the dominant wisdom father, then you're going to experience the encompassing power of the light, or if you have the power of the mother understanding, and then you're going to experience the concept of joy. Now let's talk about how that becomes this notion of leadership. So what we're learning over here right now is that leadership is all about that teaching in the Zohar, that teaching of the Rizal that explains it. Once you're stuck in the box of world, universe, emotions, reactive, survival, you're not a leader, you're a follower. But if you can connect to the Alpayim Kadma, if you can connect to higher intelligence, then you're connecting to your leadership capacity. Now, what we shared here was that within intelligence, there's lower intelligence, which is just about preparing a lecture, just about feeding the emotions, just about surviving. And then there's the higher intelligence, which is telling you no. It's not about survival. That's not what you were born. You weren't born and created to survive. You were born and created to live. Be proactive, not reactive. Live in the intelligence paradigm, not in the emotional paradigm. That's what leadership is all about. Now, what we're understanding here is that once you can connect to the pre-Bereshit, the pre-created 6 emotions, then you're connecting to leadership powers. Now, before we talk about the last introduction, which was what Moses does into the leadership powers within each and every one of us, for those of you that came a little late, I just mentioned before that when the Torah says that God said, let us make mankind in my image and likeness, each and every one of us was handcrafted with a very unique resemblance of God's image and likeness. There are no 2 individuals that carry the same uniqueness, the same image and likeness of God. That is why when you have 600,000 people get together, you have to make a blessing about the wisdom of God. You have 600,000 people, the Talmud says no 2 faces are alike, and no 2 perception paradigms are alike. That means we each have a unique gift of the image and likeness of God. Now that's what you have to share with the universe. So each and every one of us is a leader. We're a leader in the sense that God is counting on us to share with the universe, elevate the universe with that unique image and likeness that we each have. With that being said, let's now jump into the story of this week's Torah portion. Korach and the rebellion. Why did Korach rebel? So let's first talk about what the rebellion is all about. I actually want to quote you the exact verse that sums it all up, okay? Verse number 3 of this week's Torah portion. They assembled against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon yourself, for the entire congregation are all holy, and God is in their midst. So why do you raise yourself above God's assembly? Now let's talk about this. Who is Korach? Korach was Moses' cousin, his first cousin, right? Now, what happens? If he's Moses' first cousin, then he's from the tribe of Levi. If he's from the tribe of Levi, he already has a leadership position. The tribe of Levi didn't live amongst the rest. They lived closer to the temple. They served in the holy temple. They represented leadership. The 250 people that joined the rebellion were all Roshi Av Bezdins. They were all head of courthouses. The most powerful position in the Jewish nation is to sit on the courthouse because Torah is the ultimate final say. So these people all were already leaders. So let's talk to Korach. Korach's the one that started this whole mess. Why did Korach decide, I need more? So let's talk about Rashi. You know what Rashi says? Rashi says, he explains it very simple. What really ticked off Korach was that Moses made the chief of the family of Kahas, the exact name was Eliv, let me tell you the exact name. The chief, he made Elitzaphan, the son of Uzziel. Now, to understand this, you need to know that Moses' father had 3 brothers. Amram, his father, was the oldest. Yitzhar, the second one, was Korach's father. Uzziel was the youngest one. So what happens here? Think. Moses' father used to be the leader, the prince, right? Amram. And his father was the leader. When his father died, the firstborn became the leader, Moses' father. Now Moses' father has 2 sons. They're the first in line to receive any position of leadership. Moses becomes the king, Aaron becomes the high priest. The next position open should go to who? The first son of the second son, the second brother. So Amram's next brother is Yitzhar. His oldest son is Korach. He's saying, okay, I'm next in line for leadership. Moshe Rabbeinu, by divine command of God, skips over to the youngest son and takes Elitzaphan, and all of a sudden God says, oh no. I'm now going to stand up against everything that Moshe said. I'm going to now fight the entire leadership. And he was going for the gold. Korach wants to be nothing more, nothing less, but the high priest who gets to go in on that one day of the year to that one place on Yom Kippur to the Holy of Holies. That's the simple story of why Korach started the fight. Chassidus has a whole different dimension. And that's what we're going to talk about. And now you're going to understand why all this union and everything was important. Okay? Sum it up. Very simple. What went wrong with Korach's sense of leadership was that he was experiencing the power of higher understanding, i.e., simcha, joy, ema bonim smecha, right? However, he was not having the higher wisdom, which is what? Delight. What happens when you have joy without delight? What happens when you're connecting with the higher dominance of Mother Bina, Mother understanding, but you're lacking Father delight, Father wisdom? What's wrong with having joy without delight? So for this, we need to understand, what is the nature of joy? When you're happy, are you quiet? Most people, when they get happy, they become quite boisterous. As a matter of fact, that is what the sages say is the power of joy. Simcha poiritz kol hagdorim. Joy bursts through, it breaks through all boundaries. Because it's boisterous, because it's powerful. You enter into an over-the-top paradigm, out of the box. You're able to do things unprecedented to your behavior because you're experiencing the overwhelming power of joy. Joy is very powerful. Joy breaks boundaries. However, there's the dark side of joy. You know what the dark side of joy is? It falls into a false ego sense of invincibility. You all of a sudden think that you don't have to have responsibility and accountability to a higher power. Right? In general, joy leads to the YOLO. I don't know if you're young enough to know YOLO. You can ask the younger ones what YOLO is. You only live once. Go for it. Now let's talk about what ta'anug does, delight. You know what the experience of delight is? The experience of delight, just to give you a moment, this you'll understand and they will understand. As a parent, you're reading the paper, or shall I say you're reading your tablet today, and all of a sudden you notice, you look out of the corner, oh my God, it's quiet. And you see that your kids are actually playing together nicely and they're getting along. What happens? It's a very quiet sense of delight. There's a smile and a warmth that flows through you. It's not like simcha. You don't get up and start dancing. You just have such a deep, beautiful smile and you lean back. So what you experience with delight is actually the essence power as it is in quietude and humility within its source. When you experience simcha, joy, you're up. You don't let anyone sit. You ever have these annoying people that are in a happy mood and everyone has to dance and everyone has to move because they're happy? That's what happiness does. That's the power of joy. It's extremely boisterous. That's its power. So you have two different concepts here. But one without the other is not going to be able to lead you into your true inner leadership powers. It just won't happen. If you have delight, the delight of wisdom, without the joy power, you're really not able to express. If you're going to have joy without delight, the humility, the boisterous without the humility, you're going to go astray. That's what actually happened to Korach and his people, and we're still going to see that. But first, let's talk a little bit more about this. What is the difference? You know, the definition between joy and delight, wisdom and understanding, moichen de Abba, moichen de Ima. What we spoke about, the union, the internal union, which was the dominant one. What are you giving birth? So let's talk about wisdom and understanding, and you'll see why wisdom gives birth to humble delight, and understanding gives birth to boisterous joy. What is the definition of wisdom in Kabbalah? What sense of intellect is that? So I'm going to share with you. You were ever asked by a teacher, in the class, a riddle? And you're sitting there, and all of a sudden, you jump out of your chair. Oh, I got it. The teacher said, okay, sit down. Tell me what you got. 1 second, I got to figure it out. What just happened? What happened was you experienced wisdom, but don't have understanding. You jumped up because something fell into your mind, but you don't know what it is yet. You know you have the answer, but you don't have the answer. That's the experience of wisdom. The wisdom is all about accepting from above. You don't yet have it. And that breeds humility. What is understanding all about? The intellect of understanding is where you, so to speak, roll up your sleeves. You're going to sit down and you're going to dissect this idea. You're going to extrapolate everything. You're going to manipulate this concept. Because you're going to work on it until you have ownership on it. When you have ownership on it, you can extrapolate from A to B. You can never extrapolate when you're only experiencing wisdom, because you don't have ownership over the idea. You can just repeat it verbatim. But once you move into the ownership of understanding, you can extrapolate. So you see how wisdom is humility, and therefore it breeds delight, which is calm, which is humble. Being understanding is ownership. It's all about being in charge, being able to extrapolate. That's loud. There's a presence. And therefore, it gives birth to what? A boisterous joy. You see now how it works? There's a reason why Shabbat, which is wisdom, is oneg, delight, shashtil. And Yontiv is simcha. It's bina. It's joy. It's boisterous. I want to take you into God's name. In God's name, we're taught that the 4 letters of the ineffable tetragrammaton actually encompasses the 10 emanations, the 3 intellects, and the actually 2 intellects plus the crown, and the 7 emotions, the 6 and the 1. We're just going to talk about the first 2 letters, the Yud and the Hey, which represents wisdom and understanding. The Yud looks like what? A dot. It's the little dot, right? That represents wisdom, humility. All I have is, plop, an idea popped into my head. I don't even know what yet. What is the Hey? The Hey is a full, tall, right? It's a tall and wide letter with 3 lines. That's the intellect of understanding. Why is it the intellect of understanding? Because understanding dissects the entire concept into 3 lines. What are the 3 dimensions? There is the length of the concept, there is the breadth of the concept, and there is the depth of the concept. And what is the Hey? It's not a dot. It's broad. It has a presence. Yud and Hey. Wisdom and understanding. Now I want to share with you. You know what Kabbalah says? You can't have leadership when you can't get past self-sabotage. You can't get over your fear of success and take your place on rock pride if you only have the Yud or if you only have the Hey. If you only have the Yud, you don't have ownership. You can't be driven into active leadership. If you only have the Hey, the full expansion of the Hey, but you're not committed and subordinate to the Yud, what's going to happen? You're going to become a tyrant. No accountability, no responsibility, you're invincible, and boom. Therefore, Kabbalah has a beautiful saying. It's called Nikuda Behechalo, the dot in its chamber. What does that mean? What that means is that you have to have the dot of wisdom. The humble dot of wisdom needs to be housed within the expansion of the chamber. How does that work? The dot of wisdom is the humbleness. The chamber is the broad expansion to be able to have ownership, manipulate. If the dot doesn't express itself into the hay, you're no leader. You've got great ideas, but you're no leader. If your hay isn't subordinate to the dot of wisdom, you're going to have expansion, but I wouldn't want to be on your ship. You're going to be one wild captain. Really reckless. Thus, Kabbalah says, if you want to have it right, you have to have the dot in the chamber. Now we understand what went wrong with Korach. Korach was all about the experience of the expansion of joy. However, what he didn't have was the commitment and the subordinateness to Moses. Let's talk about this. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with this is very simple. It is humanly impossible to be able to simultaneously be able to encompass the unbelievable expansion of out-of-the-box thinking, and at the same time be in the humble mode of, and we are but what? The expansion says, burst through. Don't tell me nothing is impossible. Fight, overcome. And then there's the other side of leadership which demands humbleness, quietude, delight. The average human mind cannot simultaneously overcome the paradox to have them coexisting together. When the leader is in the throes of war, you're not going to see a humble leader. And when he's being humble and calm, you're not going to see the warrior. Who's the only one who's able to experience both? If you look in the book of Exodus, when they attacked Moses and Moses and Aaron stood their ground, and they were in the full blossom of leadership and influence, what did they say? V'nachnu ma, we are but what? That coexistence is not for the average mind. You don't want to ask the king for a favor when he's planning a war. It's just not possible. He's in a different paradigm right now. Moses was the type of person, the type of leader, which was able to embrace at the same time the ultimate humility, have the 5 daughters of Tzlafchad scream at him, and still be able to maintain, this is the way it's going to be done. Leadership, broadness. The average mind doesn't work that way. Why is Moses able to do that? Let's go back to what Moses said about God when he gave Miriam and Aaron over the head for gossiping about him. What did he say? He said, you're talking about Moses? Moses is not like any of you. B'chol beisi nemanhu. He is trusted in my entire home. I speak to him face to face, not in riddles. He has a clear vision of God. Moses is a different product. What does it say right before that? Right before they started gossiping, the Torah throws in a very important statement about Moses. And he was the most humble man upon the face of the earth. Moses had that incredible power of being the full, powerful leader, at the same time maintaining the absolute humility. Now, to wrap this whole picture up together, we're going to understand what went wrong with Korach. Because the only way to be able to connect into that unum, that oneness from which comes the plurus, the many, the only way to get past the paradox of what do you want me to be? Do you want me to be certain and powerful, or do you want me to be humble? Make up your mind. The only way to get past that paradox so you can feel true about yourself. I'm an altruistic leader who is not going to take garbage from anyone. Wow. I'm a humble leader, but don't step up on my toes. Because I do represent God's word, and I'm not going to let you mess with that. And yet the minute someone comes over and says, are you sure that's God's word? I'm ready to listen. I'm humble. Wow. How do you do that? The only one who could do that is Moses. The only way for anyone else to have that is by connecting to Moses. Thus, the minute the rebellion, Korach and his rebellion, started separating themselves from Moses, they separated themselves from the coexistence of leadership. Once they separated themselves from the coexistence of leadership, they fell victim to the boisterous powers of joy. And once they fell victim to the boisterous powers of joy, their leadership skills betrayed them. And that ended up with them being swallowed up by the earth. Thus they were spiraling downwards. You can't have the paradox of leadership. Humbleness but greatness. Certainty but in touch with your feminine side. Powerful, predator. You can't have those two worlds. You can't have humble delight and boisterous joy together without being connected to this amazing concept called Moses. And the minute Korach separated himself from Moses, he lost it. Once he lost it, he fell prey to one side. Once you only have boisterous joy, you fall into the dark side of joy because you don't have its balance, which is the humility of wisdom. Let's close it up, people. Let's get personal and practical. So, in closing, each and every one of us have within ourselves a leader. Right? We said that in the beginning. We were all made in the image and likeness of God, and no two of us carry the exact same aspect of the image and likeness to God. So I was once at a leadership workshop, and there was a person, the facilitator. I asked this facilitator, tell me something. Who says everyone's meant to be a leader? And he answered me, do you have something to say that you think other people should hear? If the answer is yes, you're meant to be a leader. That's the definition of a leader. Now, if each and every one of us are the only human beings in the world which uniquely reflect a certain aspect of the image and likeness of God, we all have something to say that other people need to hear. All of us are meant to be leaders. However, rightfully so, we are afraid of the paradox of leadership. And because we're afraid of the paradox of leadership, and I mentioned in the opening of the class, the fear of loneliness, fear of not remaining the same humble person, fear of just losing my altruistic self. So we're right for being afraid of the paradox. Either I'm going to become boisterous, joy, and powerful, or I'm going to be humble. How do I know I can put both together? We have that fear. And it's rightfully so. And do you know what we do because we have that fear? We don't want to be average. We want to. We know that we're meant to be a leader in some area in this world. And therefore, what am I doing? I'm trying. I'm working hard. But then I'm overcome with the fear. What do I do then? Self-sabotage. And that's the way we swing like a pendulum. We try. The minute we start succeeding, we go back to self-sabotage. Back and forth. Back and forth. Because in our minds, we're just splitting at the seams. Boisterous, certain, powerful, humble. Joy, delight. And the only way we can ever overcome that is by connecting to Moses. Now, we're taught that there's a Moses in every generation. So the practical question is, how do we connect with the guiding teachings and humility of the Rebbe? I sent out an email, and I put two of the most powerful pictures I've ever seen of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, blessed memory, came out to davening, and the Rebbe was about to start davening mincha, and a child just walked up to the Rebbe and gave him his hand. You give me your email addresses, I'll send you the email. It's going to go out on Friday. And you see the Rebbe just stopping and giving a hand. There's another picture I put, where one boy came by dollars, a young child, and he decided to discuss with the Rebbe his problems. Now the Rebbe stands close to 6 hours on a Sunday morning. The Rebbe would stand and give out dollars. This boy could have written a letter. But you look at the Rebbe's face. He stopped, was completely focused, listening to what the problem was, and giving his best advice. This is the man who met with great leaders. This is the man who published unbelievable deep thoughts of Torah. You see how it flows, the balance? There's a certain Moses dynasty that exists. Now the question is, how do we connect with that? So for closing, I want to just read to you exactly what the Rebbe writes in his calendar called Hayom Yom, and it's a response from his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe of Yosef Yitzchak, and I'm going to read this to you. You ask how you can be bound to me when I do not know you personally. The true bond is created by studying Torah. When you study my discourses, read the talks, and associate with those dear to me, the Hasidic community and the students in their studies and Hasidic gatherings, and you fulfill my requests regarding saying Tehillim and observing Torah study times, in this is the bond. There's got to be a point where leadership is no more about my capacities. There's got to be a point in leadership where it's all about connecting with my higher power. To connect with your higher power, you can neither have self-depreciation, don't do that to God, nor can you have ego. God says, I and he will not live together. That balance is brought by the teachings of Moses. The first Moses who brought us the Torah through every generation, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, going through to our Rebbe's teachings. When you're able to manifest that balance and learn that humility together with the certainty, you're able to cross the bridge from self-sabotage, fear, paradox, reactive emotional paradigm into the broad certainty of the higher intelligence. You're liberated to be able to be the leader you were meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you.